This video is a continuation of the previous one when we were looking at some simple problems and how to convert those into a Python program. We were working with the Bagel Shop problem, and you can see that I still have it here on the screen, but it has some deficiencies which we can clear up pretty easily. The first one would be, how many bagels would you like? Well, as it turns out, we have different kinds of bagels. We have 4 different kinds of bagels that we can offer the customer. So instead of just giving them how many would you like and letting us pick out the ones, then we would like for our customer to pick out the ones that they want. So let's first modify the program by allowing the user to pick how many of each kind of bagel they would like to have. So let's start by just removing that line, okay? How many bagels would you like? Let's take that out altogether, and let's replace it by giving our users the option to pick how many of each one they would like. So let's take a look at this code. Now, I've got a variable here called answer, all right? And answer is going to be a yes or no answer. So it'll be a string. Therefore, I don't have to convert it to anything. I will prompt to the screen, would you like some bagels? And then we'll hint that what they should answer is yes or no, or Y or N. And then we will indicate we have plain, wheat, onion, and poppy seeds. So that all gets written to the screen. So the user will type in yes or no, whether or not they want a bagel or want some bagels or not. Now the if statement, I'm allowing them to type in an uppercase Y, or they can type in a lowercase y. Okay, either way, this if statement will end up being true. So if they answer yes, then inside the if statement, then we will ask them how many of each kind they want. So this if statement then will allow us to test, first of all, if you want any bagels or not. Perhaps you don't. Maybe you just want to get some drinks instead. But if you do want to get a bagel, then we will output several of these 4 different prompts to the screen. Okay, how many plain bagels would you like? And then we will read that in and store it in the variable called plain. We'll do the same thing for the others. Okay, how many wheat bagels? Okay, we'll read that in and store it in the variable wheat. And the same thing for the other 2. The onion, we'll store that into onion, and poppy, we'll store that here. So the variables, plain, wheat, onion, and poppy, that's how many. Okay, how many of each bagel would you like? And of course, some of those could be 0. Now, that gives the user then the opportunity to pick out which of the different flavored bagels that they want. Well, in the end, they are all the same price. So to calculate the total cost of the order, then we just need to add up all those different bagels. So let's just put a line of code in here, and we have to watch the indentation because we don't want it to be part of the if statement. So after the if statement completes, and notice the indentation, okay, it'll stop with that one. So after the if statement, then we will add up all of those numbers, wheat, onion, poppy, and plain, and then we will save that into bagels, which is the total number of bagels that the person ordered. And it could be any combination. We could have 2 wheat, 1 onion, no poppy, no plain, whatever. We just add all that up, and that's the total number of bagels that our customer wants. Now, let's also modify this so that we can be a little bit more explicit about the drinks that the customer can order. Now, in this case, our program, after the bagel part of it, the program just jumped ahead and said, how many cups of coffee would you like, and how many cups of tea and water and juice? Well, perhaps our customer doesn't want any of those. So if they don't want any drinks, they shouldn't have to answer with 4 numbers here to indicate that they don't want any of these with 0, 0, 0, 0. So let's add a little bit of code to modify that and make it a bit more friendly to the user. So let's paste in another if statement here. Now, I'm going to use answer again. So I've used it up here for the number of bagels, but then I'm done with it. Okay, once I've added up the total number of bagels, then I don't really need answer up there anymore. So I'm going to use it, I want to use it down here. So this is going to be the following. Okay, would you like a drink? Or would you like a drink with that? I'm asking. And then I indicate we have coffee, tea, water, and juice. So that message goes out to the screen. Now, the if statement is the same as before. If the answer is an uppercase Y or if it's a lowercase y, then yeah, we assume that they do want a drink. Now, as part of the if statement, we do have to indent those 4 lines. So let's see if I can tab over, and I'll take out this blank line up here. So now, all of these questions fall below the if statement. If they do want a drink, we will ask them how many of each kind they want. So they still have to answer with 4 numbers, and some of those could be 0. However, if they don't want any drinks at all, then this if statement would be false, and they will not be asked those 4 questions. So that makes it a little bit easier. If you only want bagels, then you'll just get the prompts for the bagels. If you only want drinks, then you'll just get the prompts for the drinks. So there, that helps out a little bit. Now, as before, we still need to add up all the drinks. So we'll need to put a similar line of code in to do that, that we did for the bagels up there. So we can put that in here. And again, we don't want that to be part of the if statement, so we take away the indentation. And after the if statement then, we will add up the total number of coffee, tea, juice, and water, and we'll add those all up, and that'll be the total number of drinks. Now, given that, we're pretty good to go here, right? So we can calculate the cost of the bagels, we can calculate the cost of the drinks the same way that we did before. Well, let's run the program with the improvements, and let's see what we get. So I'll click Run, and I have the giant window that came up again. So let me bring that over, and I'll resize it so we can fit it on screen. So now we have the prompts. Okay, would you like some bagels? Yes, indeed, I would like some bagels. How many bagels? How many plain bagels do you want? I don't want any of those. Wheat? No, none of those. Okay, onion? Yeah, okay, I'll take 2 of those and 2 of the poppy seed. All right, so I want 4 bagels. Now, we have this prompt. Would you like a drink with that? We have coffee, tea, water, and juice. Let's suppose I don't want a drink. I've decided I just want the bagels. I'll take them to the office. I'll have coffee there. All right, so I'm going to answer no. I'll just put it in. And when I hit enter, then notice I get an error. So I have the red output showing up indicating an error. And one of the things it tells me is that coffee is not defined. Okay, well, what happened here? Well, since I chose to bypass the drinks, then I'm trying to do a calculation down here for the cost of the drinks. So the problem is that I'm trying to use the variable coffee, and it told me that it was not defined. All right, so coffee is not defined. So I can't proceed. I can't calculate the total cost, even though it would be 0 for these. So I need to do something else. And the same thing would be true if I were trying to compute the cost of the bagels up here. So I need to do some if statements to detect the situations where the customers are only going to want bagels or they're only going to want drinks. So we need to modify the program a bit more to handle those situations. So to do that, I need to take into account the possibility our customer didn't want any bagels at all. So I will put an if statement in here. Before I try to compute the cost of the bagels, then I want to make sure that the number of bagels is greater than 0. Now, if that's true, then I'll compute the cost of the bagels. I've got the extra line here, so I'll take that one out. So now I've put an if statement here. I don't try to compute the cost if the customer didn't want any. I'll also do a similar if statement here for the cost of the drinks. You know, before I do the calculation for the cost of the drinks, let's make sure the customer actually wanted them. So we can put an if statement here that looks similar. So let me adjust the lines there. So if the drinks is greater than 0, only if it's greater than 0, meaning they did want something, only then will I actually do the calculations. So then I'll compute the cost of the drinks here. All right, now, given that, I should have a value, for the cost of the bagels and the cost of the drinks, which I can add together and proceed from here with the rest of the program. But let's make sure. Let's try this out. So I'm going to run the program. And yes, I'll save it. And I'll bring over the output again. So here it is. And now we have the same prompts, okay? Would you like some bagels, yes or no? Okay, yes, I do want some bagels. Whoops, I have to go there. Yes, I want some bagels. And how many plain? I'll have one of those, and I'll have a wheat, no onion, and let's get one poppy seed. Now, would you like a drink with that? Okay, no, I don't. So I'll select no. Well, look, still get the same error here. Okay, coffee's not defined. So by putting the if statement in there, that didn't really cure the problem, okay, because it still is trying to do this calculation, but it can't. Even though the if statement was there, it still says, what is this thing called coffee that you're talking about? Now, this brings me back to some comments I made at the beginning of the last video, that in most cases, I'm not sure most is the right word there, in some cases, you don't have to define variables up here at the top of the program. You can just define them in the course of writing out your Python statements as you go through the program. And in many instances, that works. But in some cases, that doesn't work. So in these examples, I have the variables down here. I have coffee, I have tea, I have juice, and I have water. But if I answered no to this, okay, if I said no, then I don't want any drinks, then these will never be, those variables will never be defined. They can't be defined until you get into the if statement. So by virtue of the possibility here, that I could answer no, then these variables are not going to be defined. So now I need to take advantage of the ability to identify the variables and to declare them at the top of the program. So I'm going to put that in here, but I'm going to pause and then I'll copy and paste them in there so I don't have to waste some valuable video time typing. So let's add that code. Let's put the declarations right here, the variables, and let's initialize them to all 0. All right, now let's run the program and let's see what we get next. So we'll look at the output. I'll bring it over, and now we have the prompts. Would you like some bagels? Yes, I'm going to get bagels. And to make it easy, let's see, I'll just get one of each. Then we'll have the prompt, do you want some drinks? And I'll again say, no, I don't. Okay, more errors. But this time, coffee is not one of them. Okay, we don't have, coffee and tea, juice, water. All those are good now because I've identified them at the top of the program so that Python knows what they are. But cost of the drinks is not defined, and that shows up here in this calculation for the total cost. Well, then I need to also put that variable up here at the top of the program so Python will know what it is. And the reason it didn't work is, again, because it falls down below one of those if statements. Okay, if the drinks is greater than 0, then we'll do the cost of the drinks. Well, again, I chose not to have any drinks. And because of that, drinks will be 0. And then I will not come inside this if statement to define what the cost of drinks is. So in situations like this, you will have to put your variables at the top of the program and just initialize them to some value. Typically 0 is going to be what you need. So to complete this, then I'm just going to get all of them. Okay, so I'm going to take the cost of bagels, and I'll put it up here, and I'll set that equal to 0. And I'll also get the cost of the drinks. Okay, that variable shows up here inside an if statement, so it might not be defined otherwise. So I'll copy it, and I'll paste it up at the top, and I'll set it equal to 0 as well. And it needs an equal sign, and it doesn't like that indent, so I'll take that out. So now, perhaps I have made all the variables that I need to. I've put them all up at the top so Python knows what they are. I've given them some value. So I have defined the variables. I've identified them, step number 1, and I have given them some default value, 0, to begin with. Now, there are quite a few of these. Okay, this program, I had quite a few things. I had the base price of all the bagels, so I had to set that. I had the price for the water and the tea and the coffee, and the tax rate. So I had several things that I had to initialize. In addition to that, I had these other variables that I used in the program, but because they were inside an if statement, then it's possible that they would never be defined as the program goes through its regular flow. So I had to do this. Now, if I've got all of them, then the program would work. So let's give it a try. And let's put in our order again. So I'll bring that over. And here's the output window. I keep losing it. So here's the output window. And now let's go through and let's try the same thing again. Let's order the bagels. Well, this time I didn't answer it correctly, okay? I was supposed to answer yes or no, but I typed in how many bagels I want, all right? So that gave me an error. We'll take care of this again up in just a bit, but let's fix the other problem first by just running the program again and selecting some bagels. See, that was another instance where I had a variable that wasn't defined. Okay, so we do want bagels, so the answer is yes to begin with. Then we'll put in the number that we want. So 1, 1, and 0, and 0. All right, so now we're good to go with the bagels. Would you like a drink? I don't want a drink. And this time it works out. Okay, so everything that belongs to the drinks now has been defined. So the output looks like this. Okay, we have the cost of the bagels, we have the cost of the drinks, and if we wanted to be really careful, we could actually put an if statement around the output, and if we didn't have drinks, then we wouldn't output a number there. But we have the bagels, we have the subtotal, we have the tax, we have the final total. So that's working pretty well. But we need to test the case where we are only wanting to get drinks, and we will decline getting any bagels. So let's run the program and let's test it with that option. So I'll run it again. And now let's suppose that we do not want any bagels. So I'll answer no, hit enter. Then you see we had the same problem that I had with drinks down below. Wheat, onion, poppy, plain, those don't have any values. And they don't have any values because inside of our if statement, we answered no. Okay, no. So we didn't define plain, wheat, onion, or poppy. And because of that, we get an undefined variable. So when you have variables within if statements, then typically you will have to define them at the top of your program. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and add those in. So let's put the code right there. And now I'll have plain, wheat, onion, and poppy. Those are all declared and set to 0. One more time, let's give it a try. So this time, I think everything will work. So now let's decline to get bagels. So no, we don't want bagels. So now we get the option, do you want a drink? Okay, sure, I want a drink. Then I'll select something. Coffee, I'll have 2 coffees. No tea, no juice, and yes for water. And then there we go. So bagels now, that ends up being 0, but our drinks are something, and then we print out our final total down here. Okay, now let's try one more thing with this. You know, what's going to happen if I don't want anything? Wow, okay. Is that possible? Well, you know, you likely wouldn't run the program if that were the case, would you? But let's suppose that I've decided, I don't want anything at all. So I'll say no, I don't want any bagels. And you know what? I don't think I want any drinks either. No. And the program still works okay. It comes out 0 in the end, but the program does not give me an error, and it doesn't blow up. Okay, it does continue to give me an answer, even though it's an answer of all zeros. The final part of this is the output, and I have updated the output a little bit as well. So now, if we wanted to look at our output from the previous program, then we can update this to give us a little bit prettier output. So let's see what we can do to improve that. So one thing I'd like to do is I'd like to put a $sign before every one of these outputs. So if I put a $sign right before that double quote, then it will print out. Okay, so let's put it in there. Okay, we'll put one in each one of those lines with a $sign for each line. And then we will print out the actual cost. Okay, so I'll do all of these. Okay, 2 more. And the one on the bottom. Now the other thing that will happen is whenever you're printing out something, if you have a space in there, it prints. So this will print out bagels, some space, $sign, and then it ends. But that space right there will also be output. So I want to take out that space, and then that will move the number right next to the $sign. Okay, so that's a small change, but it'll make the output look a little bit better. Now let's run the program one last time. And let's select quite an order this time. Okay, I guess I want some bagels. And let's get down here so I can type it in. Okay, yes. How many bagels do you want? Plain, I'll have 2 of those, and I'll have 2 of those. 0 onion, 0 poppy. Yes, I want some drinks. Let me have 2 cups of coffee, have a tea, no water, no juice, and 1 water. And then it all prints out. All right. So here we go. So I've got the $sign, and there is a space there still. There is a space right there. So that is, I guess, the best I can do. But at any rate, you see now we have the $sign here, and that makes the output look a little bit nicer. And we could continue to work on this. We could get these to line up a little bit better, but I think the point here is complete. So at this point, then I think we've pretty much reached the end of this program. So I'm not going to go through it again. If you look back over here, we're rounding these, and when you print something out, in fact, the real issue here is that there's a comma, and it puts in a space when you do that as well. So I forgot about that. So if we really wanted to eliminate the space, then we'd have to use the concatenation operator, and we'd have to convert that to a string, and then we would have to add that all on here like that. Okay, so if we did that, then we wouldn't have any extra spaces there. So I'll run it one more time, and I'll show you that. So I went ahead and typed in everything. So here is the order. So you can see what I ordered. I had some bagels and some coffee and some tea and water. But the output at the first line, you can see, let me get it there. Okay, so with bagels, there's no space in there. So if you want to completely eliminate those spaces, then you have to use the concatenation operator and convert the number to a string instead of using this comma notation. If you put a comma there, then it's always going to put a space where the comma shows up. So there you go. So if you did that for these remaining items down here, you could eliminate those spaces. All right, now let's look at one more example. In this example, we're going to look back at a loop to generate a table of temperatures. But in this one, let's look at the inputs that we're going to take. All right, so we want to create a table of temperatures in Celsius and in Fahrenheit. The user will enter a starting temperature, an ending temperature, and some increment between the temperatures. So the user will pick those numbers. Our program will not know what they are in advance. So how do we solve this problem? Well, from last time, you know that it's a good idea to go ahead and come up with some variables and initialize them. So I've done that. Okay, I have Celsius, I have Fahrenheit, and I have a t-start value, a t-end, and an increment. So I've identified these as potential variables to use in the program, and I've gone ahead and I've identified them up here, or I've typed them out, which means that the Python can understand what they are, and I'll set them all to 0. Now, how are we going to go about this program? Well, one thing we need to do, of course, is we need to import the data. So that's still step number 2. So let's put that in here. And that's pretty easy. We know how to do that. We need to import the data to set up the calculations. Great. Now, we just have the prompt. The input statement prints to the screen, enter the starting temperature in degrees Celsius, and we convert it to a float. We save it in our t-start value. That's the starting temperature. Then we want to enter the ending temperature, also in degrees Celsius. We'll convert that to float. We'll save it in t-end. And what is the increment between temperatures? Well, we'll input that as well. It can be whatever we want. We'll convert it to a float. We'll save it in the increment. Now, I want to make a table. So that indicates that we would like to have a loop to do that. And we've seen the for loop used quite a bit. So can we use the for loop to do this? Let's try. So we are at the part where we want to do the calculations. What kind of loop do we use? Well, think about what we have. We have a starting temperature, we have an ending temperature, we have an increment. The for loop likes to use a list. It likes to have a range, or it likes to have a list. So it doesn't really do what I'm trying to tell it to do here. Okay, what I'd really like is I want to set this temperature value to a starting value. Okay, that's what we typed in up there. So I want to have a variable called temp, and I want it to begin with tstart. I want it to keep going until I get to the end, and I want to add the increment to it each time. But this will not compile. Yeah, well, okay, I keep saying compile because I'm used to languages that compile. Python doesn't compile, but this will not work with Python. And I can prove it if I just say run, and I say okay, then you can see the invalid syntax, right? It does not understand this for loop I'm trying to write, because the for loop cannot be written that way. So what do we do? Well, we know that with the for loop, you have to give it something like, while, for temp, in range of something. So can I do for temp in range of tend? Well, I don't know. Tend, that'll be typed in by the user. Let's see what happens if I try to run that. If I click OK, oh, gee, that didn't work at all. So it doesn't work because this has to be an integer. Okay, tend is a float. And when you're dealing with the for loop, all of the parts of the for loop, those have to be integers, or they have to be what we call an ordinal type. I mean, they could be elements of a list. They could be characters in a string, but they cannot be floating point real numbers. So this isn't going to work either. Now, what this would tell me if I look back at that question is, well, don't use a for loop, use a while loop. And that's really the point of this program, is that the for loop just isn't matched to this kind of problem at all. But believe it or not, we can make it work. So let's see how we can make the for loop work in this example. Well, let's put the code in here. Well, let's hang on. Okay, here we go. So now I have put some code into our program. And what I'm trying to do here is to make something that the for loop recognizes. And the for loop really likes to work with a list. So what I'm trying to do is to make a list, and I want to put the numbers in the list that I would get from these inputs. So I know the starting value, the ending value, and the increment in between, so I can calculate how many values there are. So that's what this first line is doing. Oh, wait, I want to know the length of a list. Okay, so I'm trying to make a list. So if I take the ending value minus the starting value and divide by 100, divide by the increment, that tells me how many numbers I'm going to have. So as an easy example, if the ending value is going to be 0, if the ending value is 100 and the starting value is 0, then this would just be 100. And if I had 10, then as the increment, then 100 divided by 10 would give me 10 values. So I can calculate the length of the list by using a calculation right there. Now, in order to make the list itself, then I have to set up the syntax for the list. So my list is called temps, and I'm going to make it a list by indicating with the empty square brackets that this is going to be a list. So whenever you do that, then you're defining a variable to be a list of things. Now, let's fill up the list. So here's my for loop. For item in range, and I'm going to go up to length plus 1, because as you will recall, in Python, you have to put one more here than what you really want to get the total number of things there. So if I calculated a length down here, if I wanted 10 numbers, then I'd have to make that 11. That would give me 10 passes through the loop. Then I'm going to append to the list using temps.append. And each time I go through the loop, I'm going to append this number. Okay, so to begin with, I'm going to append the starting number, which is what the user typed in. And I'm going to add on to that the increment times the item. This will be 0 the first time. When you write your for loop like this, item will be 0, and then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So the first time through the loop, that will be 0, and my first number will just be the t_start value. The second time through the loop, I will append to my list another number. It'll be t_start plus 1 times the increment. Okay, so whatever that increment is, I'm going to add that to the start. That'll be my second number in the list. And then I'll continue until I've gone through the loop enough times to satisfy the length that I calculated up here. Now, to prove to you that produces a list, I want to print out that list of temperatures. Okay, so let's run the program and let's set the list up. Okay, so I'll run it. And now we get to type in the values. All right, so let's make it easy. Let's have a starting temperature of 0. Let's have an ending temperature of 100. And let's have an increment of 10. Okay, then here are the numbers that go in my list. And you can see they go 0 through 100, which is exactly what I wanted. So then I have created a list. Okay, well, the for loop loves lists, so now it can use this list to create the table. How do you do that? Well, now it's easy. Okay, we just put our for loop here, and we can generate a table nice and so I'll paste the code here to do that. So we have a comment, generate the temperature table. Then I'm just going to use a regular for loop for temp in the plural temps. Then I'm going to calculate the Fahrenheit, and then I'll print out the temp, which is the Celsius value, and the Fahrenheit value. Okay, so remember, temp starts with our first value that we used up here for t_start. So when I generated that list, the first temperature in there will be the t_start temperature. Now, let's run the program again, and we should get a table. Nice temperature table. So we have to input the values once more. So let's put in the same numbers. Let's do 0, and let's do 100, and increment 10. And look, there we have our table. Okay, so we get the list, and now we can use the for loop to generate our table of Celsius and Fahrenheit temperatures. All right, so we did it, but we had to go a kind of a roundabout way to get it done. Let's do the same thing, but now let's use a while loop, and this will show you that the while loop is a better choice. So after we've done all that, then I'm going to add a while loop down here to do the same calculation. So let's put the while loop here at the bottom. What I want to do is to separate out the tables from each other. So I want to print to the screen. Here's the \n that skips a line. I'll print out while loop. I'll skip another line, another \n. And then here's the while loop. So with the while loop, I can just set the Celsius temperature to the beginning value. And I really can write a statement that I tried to write previously with the for loop. Okay, while Celsius is less than or equal to the ending temperature, T_end, that our user entered up there. Okay, while it's less than that, I want to calculate Fahrenheit, and then I want to print both out to the screen. And with the while loop, you do have to make sure to increment your loop control variable Celsius by adding on the increment. And otherwise, you'd have an infinite loop there. So we have to have that line of code. So this takes us through the loop. Now, let's look at the output we get from this.